Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I am delighted to have Kit Klarenberg with us. And Kit is an investigative journalist exploring the role of intelligence services in shaping politics and perceptions, which is particularly relevant to this Keir Starmer story that the media have put a blackout on doing any kind of deep dive. We are wondering whether these toy boys are part of some YMCA-esque playground that Keir Starmer has been dipping his toes in, or are they some really inventive black ops people are trying to lean on Keir Starmer and compromise the UK government? So, without any further ado, when you saw this story breaking, and huge thank you for coming on, I mean, what was going through your head? I was like, this is bizarro land.
Bizarro land's one word for it. I think Zoolander Part 3, the Ben Stiller movie in which models are used for terrorism attacks, loom large in my mind. This story, it started off weird and has gotten weirder and weirder in every conceivable regard. So on May 8th, a vehicle was set on fire in Kentish Town, that's northwest London. It was a Toyota which was formerly owned by Keir Starmer and sold to a neighbour of his. There was another arson attack 3 days later at a property in Islington that Keir Starmer used to own, which has since been turned into flats. And then there was another arson attack yet again in Kentish Town, at the former residence of Keir Starmer while he was a mere MP before becoming Prime Minister, which is now rented to his sister-in-law. And that was on May 12th. So within 4 days, you have three clearly targeted arson attacks, with the ultimate target being Keir Starmer. Now, in Parliament, initially, Starmer gave a statement on this, which got very little press coverage, which was the fires were an attack on all of us, on democracy and the values that we stand for, blah, blah, blah. It didn't really get very much in the way of media pickup because, I mean, who listens to what Keir Starmer has to say about anything, really? That's kind of understandable. But the plot kept thickening because there was a stream of arrests of 3 different people who were one way or another, the details remain unforthcoming, tied to this wave of arson attacks. All 3 of them were Ukrainians. At least 2 of them were models who had profiles on modeling websites, which I had the foresight to archive before they got inevitably deleted. This is while they're in police custody. So who did the deletion is up to our imagination. One of the arsonists or alleged conspirators in this was arrested at Luton trying to do a runner to Romania, which is a country which, of course, neighbours Ukraine and has been the site of some geopolitical conniving, to say the least, over the past year. Excuse me. Now, this kind of there was this flurry of reports about these arrests, but the media didn't seem overly interested. So you can find, say, on the Sun website, the Daily Mail website, articles about how, this Ukrainian national has been arrested for in connection with these arson attacks, and there'll be like 100 words of text along with pictures and or videos of the blazes that they were one way or another responsible for setting, but not really any real context or speculation about who or what might be responsible or why they might have done this. This all changed on this past Sunday, which was the 25th, I believe, where in a remarkably concerted way, mainstream British publications, including the Financial Times and the Daily Mail and the Times, they all published lengthy articles suggesting that Russia might have been behind these arson attacks. Now, to take the FT piece as an example, and I think it is worth reading in full because it is very odd. Is that its headline states, Russia, yes, UK investigating possible Russian involvement in Starmer arson attacks. But then when you get into the details of this, after giving you that lead, it's like the FT is trying to hedge its bets and say, oh, well, don't actually read too much into the fact that the police are considering this. And it explicitly states that this is just one of many avenues that are being reported by the, being investigated by the police. Nothing is being ruled out at this stage. The Ukrainian trio conspired, allegedly, with others unknown. And the reason for their conspiracy is unexplained. And it also, the FT also very bizarrely stated that, well, even if Russia or individuals tied to Russia were responsible for this somehow, that doesn't mean the Kremlin was implicated. Of course, you know, the headline is what people are going to remember, and it's going to stick in people's minds that, hey, Russia might / probably did have something to do with this wave of arson attacks. But another very, very, very strange aspect of this that it really has set my antenna going is there is a large number of people who are very loud online on social media and in the traditional mainstream media, who, you know, they are Russia experts, quote unquote, or counter disinformation specialists, or just pure like Ukraine ultras, like people who support Kiev unquestioningly and indefatigably, who are usually very keen to blame Russia for everything and anything, including quite literally bad weather. But they are silent. Okay, they're completely silent. They haven't even posted about the news reports blaming Russia for this. To give you one example, Paul Mason, my old friend, he is a veteran British climate journalist who I exposed in the summer of 2022 as being on the payroll and under the direction of British intelligence. He was getting given talking points to reiterate in public from his intelligence handlers. He was getting given lists of targets to go after, you know, independent journalists and activists who oppose the NATO proxy war in Ukraine, yeah, were in some cases, including my own employers, the Grey Zone. Paul Mason was cooking up plans to try and destroy the outlet via quote unquote full nuclear legal, and wanted our emails gone over and our text messages gone through to prove that we are working for foreign powers. We aren't, but you know, that's what he wanted to do. He has viciously attacked people for opposing further aid to Ukraine. He is again someone who is very quick to blame Russia for everything and anything. He is an OG Starmer supporter. He was a huge advocate for Starmer when Starmer was Brexit secretary in 2019, and was breathlessly supported his bid for the leadership and made all sorts of bizarre statements saying that if you don't think that Keir Starmer will advance the class struggle, you're not understanding social democracy from a Marxist perspective, and all of these other endorsements of Keir Starmer. Now, the mainstream media has claimed, on the admitted basis of zero evidence, that Russia could, emphasis on could, have something to do with this, this wave of attacks on Paul Mason's personal hero. And he has said nothing about it, which is very, very, very weird. And it strongly suggests to me that this story is being stage managed. What information is being released is being heavily controlled. People like Paul Mason are being told not to go near it. And I strongly suspect that the kind of insertion of speculation into the public sphere that Russia might have had something to do with this was in response to widespread public speculation that Starmer may have had a personal relationship with one or some of these young, handsome Ukrainian boys. Because such was the media blackout on this, there was an enormous amount of conjecture and theorizing online as to who these people were and why they did what they did. And a recurrent suspicion was that maybe Keir Starmer might have owed them some money for services rendered. I mean, I myself am not drawing any conclusions. I think that there are a number of other alternative explanations for what happened and why, which we can get into. But it's a very striking feature that moving in lockstep, you have major agenda-setting media outlets all come out with the same story, which basically states there's no evidence for it whatsoever, but it could have been Russia. And then the same braying mob of people who are only too happy to leap on events to attack Russia, blame Russia. They have had nothing to say about any of this, and I'm sure I don't need to tell your viewers, but it does bear repeating that the level of control that British intelligence and its national security infrastructure maintains over what the media reports and how in Britain is absolutely massive. There is something known as the DSMA committee, which is the Defence and Security Media Advisory Committee. They issue what are known as D notices, which means do not publish notices, and they routinely boast in their internal, their public records of their regular meetings with the heads of major newspapers and TV outlets that they've successfully suppressed this story, this information was trending and going viral on social media, and we told the mainstream outlets not to go near it, and they didn't. So if the British state wanted to shut down this story entirely, they could do it very easily, and they haven't done that, which is another kind of layer to the onion here. And it does raise the very obvious question of whether the British establishment does want this story in the public domain to a degree. Whether that, again, is to place pressure on Starmer, to raise uncomfortable questions for Starmer at a time when his popularity is, he's the least popular prime minister in history, having replaced the least popular prime minister in history. His government is, its polling is in the toilet. Nigel Farage's reform is now leading in most national polls. People are talking about Farage as the next prime minister. Labour just got wiped out in the local elections. And then against this backdrop, you also have Starmer for many months was talking about formal British deployment to Ukraine, and then backed off from that at the start of May, having initially claimed that he was ready to deploy British forces on the ground to Ukraine to fight alongside Ukrainians and to deploy British jets to police the skies and shoot down Russian missiles. This all got dropped at the start of May, and there were a Ministry of Defence official claimed, "Oh, we were never planning to do this, and we always thought it was crazy." In direct contradiction of everything British officials have been saying for months prior to that point. You also have Lammy and Starmer making critical noises about the Gaza genocide and Israel's mass slaughter and torture of the Palestinians trapped there. So, I mean, both of these geopolitical factors, or one independently of the other, could have influenced these attacks. There are some indications that at least one of the Ukrainians had some ties of an indeterminate kind to Israel. I don't know what to make of that, but the whole thing stinks to absolute high heaven. And yes, we are no closer to resolution on this almost a month later.
All right. Well, that was an excellent opening summary. And for people who've just tuned in, we've got over 1,000 watching live. We are with Kit Klarenberg, who specializes in exposing the role of intelligence in meddling in politics and the media. All of Kit's links are in the description box. I'm going to put them in the live chat now. We've got Kit on X, we've got Kit's website, we've got Kit's Buy Me a Coffee. So please support his important work. There's not many people talking about this case. And if you've got a question for Kit while we're live, please put it in the chat. I see several have already come in, and we've got until 1:30 before the next show. So please keep the questions and keep the support coming. You know, what immediately comes to mind, and it was one of the big questions asked by George Galloway. He was one of the first to report on this as well, was how on earth would these young lads know to target these two properties and this vehicle? And if you look at the history of how they are associated to Keir Starmer, it's not as straightforward as people would think. And, you know, some of these properties, the car, they go back certain years. The car was sold to a neighbor, etc. I mean, what kind of person would have that information to provide to these young lads? Or would these young lads know because they had visited the properties and they would know because they've seen this car before?
Yeah, precisely. I mean, that is a very I forgot to, much to my shame, I forgot to mention that. But it's like, yeah, that, like, I mean, how did they have this detailed, if outdated, information? That's not something that you could find out very easily, particularly when the person in question is the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Now, somewhat relatedly, another kind of curious aspect of this is that these three Ukrainians who are being remanded in custody, and it seems that with uncharacteristic celerity, the British justice system is moving to prosecute them very quickly, perhaps in the hope that they can be jailed and forgotten about and silenced in the process. But they are being investigated by Britain's counter-terrorism directorate. However, they have been charged with criminal rather than national security offences. Now, this is interesting for several reasons. Number one, is that, well, you might imagine that a wave of targeted arson attacks directed at the Prime Minister would, by definition, be a national security matter. And we don't have to think very hard to imagine what the media and establishment response would have been to, say, three men from Pakistan targeting properties in a vehicle tied to Tony Blair. You know, we would see their faces plastered all over the news, speculation about their motives and their potential international connections. There's none of that. But on the subject of how they are being charged with criminal misconduct rather than breaching national security laws, I have written for the Grey Zone, and the former British ambassador to Uzbekistan, Craig Murray, has also written about this. Britain now has what's known as the National Security Act. It is a sweeping and terrifying bit of legislation, which its terms are so broad and vague that people will almost inevitably break the law without wanting to, intending to, knowing they have. So, for instance, just to give you an example, and I mean, it almost sounds like a joke and a not particularly funny one, is that under the National Security Act, you can be arrested and prosecuted for taking photos of public buildings on the basis that doing so could amount to providing information useful to a hostile power. But they don't have to prove that you are doing so for a hostile power for you to be prosecuted under the Act. They don't need to prove that you have harmed Britain's national security for you to have committed a national security offence. They don't even need to define the term. It's whatever they say it is. So, I mean, some of your viewers may be aware. I was stopped and detained for almost 7 hours the last time I returned to the UK, and had my digital devices strip searched. I remain under investigation in the UK. I can't say that it's very high on my list of tourism destinations at the moment as a result. But recently there have been several prosecutions of alleged Iranian spies for taking photos of the headquarters of Iran International. Now, Iran International is probably one of the most dubious and shady media organizations in the entire world. Its funding is very opaque, although there are suggestions that it comes from Saudi Arabia. It publishes relentless negative stories about Iran. And yes, it has no apparent means of financial support. It's unclear who's paying their rent for their massive office in London, or who's paying their bills, because it certainly isn't, advertising revenue or readership's donations. But there have been several people recently who've been arrested and in some cases successfully prosecuted for taking pictures of the Iran International building. Now, there was no evidence in any of these cases that they were doing so for Iran or any other power, but they still got clapped by the National Security Act because it's so broad and vague. So if the British state really wanted to throw these Ukrainians to the wolves, they could have very easily hit them with any number of national security related charges. But no, they're just being charged with criminal arson, which has lesser penalties and is less likely to result in bombshell disclosures in court. That's a very interesting feature and a suspicious one as well. I mean, and this also occurs, of course, against a backdrop of speculation about Keir Starmer's sexuality and his very close relationship with his clothes designer, who is a member of the House of Lords. All very, very, very murky.
So, Lord Ali, what's his role in all of this? Isn't he associated with one of the properties that was attacked?
Yeah, well, no, I mean, he's Lord Wahid Ali he kind of has been embroiled in scandal after scandal related to Keir Starmer. He was Keir Starmer's a chief campaign fundraiser. He's been a member of the House of Lords since 1998, and he was he was elevated by Tony Blair. He enjoys a very close personal relationship with Starmer, and some people have suggested that it goes deeper than mere friendship. But yes, that one of the properties was allegedly somewhere that Lord Ali liked to spend a lot of time. And he has also publicly commented on the attacks. So yeah, it's it's quite some mystery, which would be, you would think, clarified by disclosures by the police. But they are being very careful about what they release. To give you an example, that aforementioned Financial Times article, it stated, none of the Ukrainians are known to have any affinity or connection to Russia, and one of them posted pictures of the Ukrainian military. Where did they post it to? What platform? What my other things they have posted indicate why they might have done this, who they were conspiring with. Because allegedly this conspiracy is completely unexplained, but they're sure it's a conspiracy. So the police in cases like this, as I say, are usually very, very keen to get the media on side with a particular narrative of who was responsible and why. And here they, to a degree, want to blame Russia, but they're also very quick to remind people that, well, actually, don't read too much into it, and this is just a working hypothesis. I mean, you know, when a teenager goes missing, say, all of their personal and familial associates become avenues of interest to the police. It doesn't mean that they did anything or that they are in any way responsible. They just become of interest to the police. The police were very quick to stress, as I say, that a connection to Russia is just one theory, emphasis on theory, we're exploring among many, and we've ruled nothing out. And yet the entire media apparently randomly but simultaneously decided to front page this on the same day. Yes.
So apparently Starmer was living at one of Lord Ali's properties, and when he was questioned about it, he said it was to do with taking pressure off one of his kids because it was exam time. But when people researched it, the kid had already done his exams. What was going on? Why was Starmer really at Ali's property? Any idea on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, like I say, you know, Lord Ali is you know, openly openly gay, and there has been some rumor and innuendo about Starmer's sexuality and how real his much vaunted marriage is. So I mean, yes, and I think this is what has given rise to suggestions that Starmer may have had a relationship of some kind with these three Ukrainians. There was a video that did the rounds on TikTok that showed CCTV footage, which very much looked like Starmer and Lord Ali having a snog. You know, which has been did the rounds on X for quite some time and has since been buried. And it's not something that officials have commented on, despite you know, the media taking an interest on this. Yes, Lord Ali has been Starmer's personal stylist, and you know, bought Starmer a large amount of clothes. You know, I mean, because that's just what you would do for a friend, I guess. Yeah, I'm sure there's nothing suspicious behind that at all.
So, do you think that Starmer's wife is a beard, a la Hugh Edwards, Schofield, etc.?
Well, I mean, you know, stranger things have happened. I mean, you've got to bear in mind that, you know, Ed Miliband married his longtime partner. I think it was the second that he became leader of the opposition. It was within like a few days he married his longtime partner, and he claimed it had absolutely nothing to do with being elected leader. It was just a coincidence. I mean, you know, we have had one prime minister in history, I think, Edward Heath, who hasn't been married, and of course rumours about his own sexuality and whether he may well have had a penchant for young boys have abounded, you know, ever since he took office in 1970, and they abound to this day. So yeah, I mean, it's not really the done thing in British politics to be a wifeless prime minister, let alone opposition leader. Likewise, you know, William Hague, who was, you know, married his secretary, I believe, while he was a minister, and then ended up, I believe, when he was not long after the Tories took office in 2010, it was found that he had, quote unquote, occasionally shared hotel rooms with his 25-year-old parliamentary special advisor, and this was to you know, share. This was to cut on costs, so they didn't have to get separate hotel rooms, which doesn't sound particularly convincing. But I'm not making any concrete judgments around Starmer's love life, although he is remarkable in terms of someone who appears to, it's almost like he's from central casting in terms of his rather abrupt and quiet rise to power. There are very clear indications that he was being groomed from quite an early age to fulfill this role. Bizarrely, he ended up on the radar of the Czech intelligence services during the Cold War because he spent some time in what was then the Czech Republic, and it was assumed that he was working for British intelligence. I think this was might have been the 1980s or earlier, but anyway, once he becomes the head of the Crown Prosecution Service, which is a huge part of his legend building and his mythos, it taught him the value of commitment to the public good and filled him with value.